Thank you, and welcome to the Wednesday, August 9th meeting of the Planning Advisory Committee. The meeting is now called to order and roll has been taken. I'll briefly go over some of the procedural rules for our meeting. This meeting is held in a hybrid format in accordance with the electronic participation policy for virtual meetings. The full corporate policy 050 regarding electronic virtual meetings is available online to review. All cameras for virtual committee members shall remain on to ensure quorum. Staff and delegates participating virtually are reminded to keep their video and microphones off until requested by the chair or members of the committee. Members of the committee shall indicate they wish to speak by physically raising their hands. Members who are present in person will be given an opportunity to speak first, followed by virtual participants. All members of the committee will vote by physical show of hands. Please leave your hand up until the chair has determined the result of the vote. In the event of a connection or service interruption that occurs that affects quorum, we may recess the meeting for up to 15 minutes to regain quorum. If quorum is not achieved, the meeting will be adjourned. All rules for delegations under the city's procedural bylaw continue to apply. Declarations of conflicts of interest. Members of the committee, do any of you have declarations of conflicts of pecuniary interest to make on any of the items before the committee? Okay. Seeing none, there are presentations and delegations. There are no formal presentations on today's agenda. Items for consideration. There are two items for consideration today. We'll start with item 4.1. 4.1 is the city-initiated applications for official plan amendment OP 0423 and zoning bylaw amendment PZ 1323. Catholic High School, and with no financial impact, and it's report number 2023-498. I'll ask Joe Muto to come forward and make a presentation. As a reminder, you'll have 10 minutes to present, inclusive of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Joe Muto, Manager of Development Planning with the city's Planning Department and Development Services. With me this afternoon, I have the Manager of Development Engineering, Mr. Gary Beaver, and Mr. Alan Waterfield, who's the Manager of Long Range Planning. Before you this afternoon, we're presenting, or I'm presenting, two applications. One for application for official plan amendment, and the second is for a rezoning amendment, both initiated by the city of Brantford. Next slide, please. The application and a report before you this afternoon has been prepared by myself in consultation with the various departments. The applications are currently under review and circulation with the other agencies and departments within the city, and is being targeted for the September 14th Planning Committee meeting agenda. The applications are for a proposed Catholic secondary high school, roughly having a gross floor area of just over 12,000 square meters. The proposal will include an associated parking area as well as outdoor play fields and an accessory daycare. It will be located off of Powerline Road. Next slide, please. So in considering the proposal before you this afternoon and staff's review of the applications, there are a couple things that are highlighted in the staff report. One being the direction that was provided in November of 2022 and July 2022 by council with respect to their direction on how to expedite the applications before you today. In conjunction with that direction, there was also a subsequent land sale, and the land sale is in part owned all by the city. There's 170 acres of land up in that area, formerly known as Spearberg Farm, and 17 of those acres are currently being under APS, an agreement to purchase and sale between the city and the school board. The other options that with respect to development considerations was the block plan. So with the introduction of the new official plan in 2021 of August. Block plans, there were 8 block plans proposed and approved throughout the city. This particular area that we're looking at with regards to the city initiated applications are the Powerline Central block plan. There is a conglomerate of developers that have already purchased a number of the lands in that area and have well over a year have been conducting studies and reviews and meeting with the city with respect to the block plan process. So now the block plan process itself is a visioning exercise that will address land use as well as a more comprehensive servicing strategy and vision for that community, in particular here, the Powerline Central block plan area. The block plan area basically does all of the heavy lifting and is formally endorsed by the chief planner once the terms of reference are finalized. Once that is done, the actual Development Planning Act applications can then be forwarded on to the city by the various owners within the block plan that are participating. The school board in this instance is also a participating landowner, as well as the city owns the remnant portion of that 170 acres of land off of Powerline Road. The other development considerations that were analyzed was the land use planning analysis with respect to the designations and various overlays, which I will discuss in a future in one of my next slides. More paramount to all of this is obviously the servicing. These are greenfield lands that have not been considered for servicing as of yet, but have been through a master servicing plan strategy. The school board has also provided staff and the city with a conceptual site plan rendering that will be utilized in a bit more detail once we have a more finalized rendition of that plan to then implement the actual footprint, if you will, of the proposed school and associated parking and setbacks, etc., so that it would then look into the modifications necessary to the zoning application. And finally, through the actual statutory meeting that will be held in September, staff will also circulate these applications and post applications on site, or sorry, post public notice on site to obtain any public information. Next slide, please. So this is the approved block plan for the Powerline Central block, and the asterisk or star is the portion of lands that the city will be selling to the school board. As you can tell on this land, it's a community comprised of intensification along the corridors of King George and Wayne Gretzky Parkway. There will be a future, or there is a EA currently ongoing for the extension of Wayne Gretzky Parkway around Park Road North there. And then you have some neighborhood corridor and neighborhood node areas, as well as the yellow areas that are delineated as neighborhoods and residential. So they'll comprise of various uses or community uses. And then the green identified as the natural heritage areas. Next slide, please. With respect to the natural heritage areas, the site itself is mostly outside of the core natural area, with the green dotted line delineating the adjacent overlands schedule, which is basically identifies policies within the official plan. It's basically a 90-meter buffered area that does not preclude development, but there needs to be additional studies done in order to modify that line any further. So what is being done by the conglomerate of participating landowners within the Block Plan Central, Powerline Block Plan Central area is that they're undergoing a more comprehensive environmental impact study for the entirety of the lands, which includes this block or these particular lands for the school block. Next slide, please. So the Applications themselves will look at an official plan amendment, and what the official plan amendment is seeking to address would be a change from the residential designation to a major institutional designation. It, as mentioned earlier in my previous slide, will also evaluate the adjacent lands overlay and then assess that policy criteria. And by policy criteria, what I'm referring to is, where can a major institutional designation go? It fits that policy framework within the current official plan. Secondly, there's also a zoning bylaw amendment. And in this, it's a little unique, as these lands were brought into the city through the annexation back in 2017 of January. And so for the purposes of this rezoning application, we're still going to utilize the County of Brant zoning bylaw, the date that we accepted the land. So any changes to the current bylaw wouldn't take effect. It's the zoning bylaw that was basically endorsed at the time that the city entered into the agreement. So the former county zone lands for this particular site is zoned as agricultural. And the proposed zoning to accommodate a Catholic secondary school would have to go to the ND zone, or the major institutional. So as I mentioned previously, is that the change would basically be a land use change for the permissions to allow for the school. And then lastly, to address any potential modifications, such as minimum parking standards or setbacks, height, etc. Once we have a more finalized site plan to address those modifications with. Next slide, please. For you, and in the report, the city generally provides an air photo or aerial photograph of the area. And in this case, we now have the technology to do a flyover or drone, if you will, of the lands. So as you can tell, it's primarily vacant, with just, for the most part, cultivated for agricultural purposes, with some naturalized areas or hedgerows to the east and west. Most of the access for now is proposed off of Power Line Road for the school itself. To the further beyond that red line between the green kind of forested area and the plowed area is basically where a future east-west collector will be located, as identified in the previous schedule I showed you on the Power Line Central Plan, which is council approved. So the actual area in which it will cross that green area, if you will, that naturalized area, is yet to be determined, and that's being reviewed and analyzed through the consultant work that the conglomerate group of owners is undertaking. Next slide, please. Before you is also a conceptual plan that the school board has provided the city. This will be reviewed in further detail to analyze parking standards, the overall school layout, as well as transportation movement for the various amount of school buses, staff, and kind of kiss and ride areas that are generally associated with the high school. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, these amendments will implement a great need for a community asset here within the city and beyond, for that matter, in consultation with the school board. The catchment area for this particular school will also include Norfolk, Brant County, as well as Haldeman. The school board will continue to participate in the block plan process, and the city will review all technical matters through the block plan studies, as well as the future site plan application. What I'm seeking recommendation from this committee today, Mr. Chairman, is that the city initiated applications for official plan amendment OP 0423 and zoning bylaw amendment PZ 1323 for the Catholic high school be received, and that all comments from this planning advisory committee be included in staff's future staff report for planning committee in September. thank you. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any of the committee's questions.
Thank you. Let's first of all get the this on the floor. May I have a mover and a seconder for the motion? From mover, seconder, and a second. Thank you. Okay. Now that we've got that, are there any questions for staff?
Is there a block plan number or something for this area?
There's no particular number. It's, I believe, Schedule 4 in the official plan, and the actual block plan is called the Powerline Central Block Plan.
Yes, go ahead.
Good morning. Through the chair, I have a question to the staff. Is the traffic on Powerline Road going to be taken in consideration since there's a lot of traffic right now? Is it going to be double lane or single lane? Just the way it is.
That to the chair, Gary Peever, manager of development engineering. To the committee member, a transportation impact study will be completed by the school board, and they are looking at various options from the traffic standpoint of Powerline Road. Likely, the recommendation would not be to include 4 lanes total yet. However, turning lanes and intersection details would be included in that report and are expected to come forward. Ultimately, as Joe mentioned, the Powerline Road itself as a whole is going to be going through an EA process, environmental assessment process. That's going to be completed by the city. It is currently out for bids and tenders for hiring a consultant to do that. Through that project, that would look at the traffic loading for Powerline as a whole, including all the future growth and the ultimate end goal of what Powerline would turn it into.
And my second question is, what the city going to do with the rest of the land?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to member Panay. That's still yet to be determined. There has been on some of the concept plans provided by the group ideas for maybe another school site if possible. There's also opportunity for additional community uses such as those neighborhood uses and maybe predominantly commercial. It would be something that would be led by our new manager of real estate services at the city, and it would go in the normal course of surplus lands that the city would dispose of.
Any other questions? I have seen none in the room and none virtually. I've got a couple. So this is it needs to be rezoned to be major institutional. Are there other major institutional blocks or plots already proposed in some of the other Powerline blocks? I'm sorry?
They're all zoned agricultural as they.
No, I currently understand that there's own agriculture, but I'm looking at the block process specifically. So in the block process, this block didn't have a major institutional land use proposed. I'm wondering on the other Powerline blocks, either west or east, was there a major institutional land use proposed in one of those blocks?
I don't believe any of the 8 blocks had any major institutional unless it already existed in the area. Right. So, and that's not a zoning question. That's more of like a broader designation.
And I realize that.
Yeah.
So the follow-up to that then is if this particular plot of land is taken out of the residential proposed use and moved into the other category, how does that impact the residential densities required to maintain the future growth plan?
Sorry, Alan Waterfield, manager of long range planning. When we were preparing the official plan and analyzing the required densities and the targets for the expansion lands, we did allocate and consider that we would need one secondary school in the northern lands. Just with a basic estimate as to how much land that would be, as well as 4 elementary schools across the north. So the
Okay.
providing the high school here isn't going to take away from the density targets that we have established for them.
And if I could just add to the response, Mr. Chairman, is that what we're seeing in some of these initial calculations and submissions is that the type of built form is a much more denser than what we have already kind of considered. And that is because the growth plan itself identifies a minimum. They're going beyond the minimum because that's what the market's dictating. Okay.
Great, thank you very much for that clarification. Are there, the report to us also indicated that potentially a secondary temporary access might be required to that site prior to the construction of any other roads in the area. Can someone comment on why a secondary access may be required?
Yeah, I can respond to that, to the chair, to yourself. That secondary access is an option for when Powerline Road would need to be rebuilt.
Okay.
Ultimately, the timing of construction, the school has a great chance of being open and operating before Powerline is completely upgraded. And during that construction disruption, a secondary access would be beneficial to keeping the school traffic moving. Now, the east-west collector that Joe had described, if that was in place beforehand, that would be your secondary access, which would be your ultimate condition.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions or comments? The staff has been recording the general nature of the questions. Any further comment by committee members? Okay, so then could I call for a vote by show of hands on the motion that is on the floor? 1, to receive the report, and 2, that any comments that we made during this discussion be relayed back to the city for their report.
All those in favor? Those opposed, if any? Motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you very much. Moving on then, item 4.2 is a bylaw amendment. PZ 0923-4344 Elgin Street, financial implications none. Report number 2023-494. Is Jeff on board to be able to provide and make the presentation?
Bear with me. Jeff, you'll have to accept that prompt. And you should be able to share your screen now.
Thank you, Jeff. Just a reminder, you have 10 minutes for your presentation and questions.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, members of the Planning Advisory Committee, Mr. Chair. My name is Jeff Medeiros. I'm a senior planner with the Planning and Development Services Department here at the city. And I'm here this afternoon to present a zoning bylaw amendment application, file number PZ 0923. So it is a Planning Act application, meaning that it is subject to the statutory requirements of the Act. So there will be requirement for public notification, a statutory public meeting, and there are requirements in terms of the processing and managing of the application. The general purpose of the application is to facilitate an expansion and redevelopment of the Brantford Police Services Station, which some of you may be aware of. The lands itself, or the police station, is located at 344 Elgin Street. These applications are also include the lands next door for 101 Carter Street. Just to provide a bit of a background, The applications is a result of council direction regarding the future redevelopment and expansion plans. It has been determined that those plans are better suited or are suited specifically for the current police station property. To facilitate that, and this is sort of outside of the planning process, there is an agreement of purchase and sale with the neighboring landowner, which is owned by Enbridge or Enbridge Gas, formerly Union Gas. As part of that agreement of purchase and sale, there's two components. There's a portion of lands that are to be purchased from the city. In addition to that, there is a proposal for registration of an easement in favor of the city to facilitate the future expansion plans. In terms of the proposal itself, as I said, it is an expansion to the current facility. There are 3 separate building additions that are proposed, and generally speaking, the additions itself, it's been determined that the expansion is needed for one, to accommodate current needs of the current police force here in the city, as well as expected future growth and just some of the complexity that is occurring in policing in general these days. From the official plan, the current land use designation, so there's 2 separate designations. So the police station facility has a major institutional designation. The neighboring property and a number of the properties along the Wayne Gretzky corridor are designated major commercial center. As identified in the staff report, the police station is considered a public facility under the city's official plan policies as well as provincial policy. So therefore, it has been determined that the subject zoning amendment application does not require an official plan amendment to facilitate the proposed police station expansion. So generally speaking, the lands to be rezoned include both the lands that are to be acquired from 101 Carter Street, so the Enbridge lands as well as the easement lands. They are proposed to be placed in an institutional services zone. So that's an I-1 zone. That would be consistent with the current police station facility. As part of the zoning process, there has been a number of comments that have been provided to the project team on this project. And the plan is to proceed with the statutory public meeting in front of the planning committee in September. And at that point, staff will provide a recommendation report regarding the zoning application. So as noted in the staff report, 2 recommendations, one for the report to be received, and staff are seeking any particular comments, if there are any, regarding the need, from the Planning Advisory Committee regarding this particular application, and that will form the basis for the staff report that's presented to the Planning Committee. And that is it. So if there's any questions or comments, I'd be more than happy to answer them to the best of my ability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I have a mover and seconder to place the motion on the floor, please? I have a mover and a seconder. Thank you. Okay. Asking the committee members then, are there any questions of the city staff?
Chair, Councillor Hunt has her hand up.
Oh, yes, go ahead. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. So through the chair to Jeff, Councillor Carpenter and I were working with Nicole Goodbrand on this file. So I'm assuming you've maybe taken over the file from her. And we had tried to get a public meeting regarding the rezoning of the lands, a neighborhood meeting. And she had indicated that because we weren't able to get that done in time for what the police station needed, can you maybe comment on what the plan is going forward in terms of the neighborhood engagement around the rezoning of the lands?
Certainly. So through Mr. Chair to Councillor Hunt, yes, I am taking the file over on behalf of the planning department. As it relates to public engagement and input, this is a Planning Act application, so it is subject to the statutory requirements for public notification. So that would include a sign post on the property, as well as notification to all property owners within 120 meters. There is still that requirement for a statutory public meeting, so that would be done in front of planning committee. So there will be opportunity for members of the public to either provide comments in advance or appear at the meeting in front of planning committee. The neighborhood meeting component can be waived, as you had mentioned. And that is actually an official plan policy. So it's not the statutory public meeting, but there will be a statutory public meeting in front of planning committee, which will provide opportunity for public input engagement.
Okay, thanks for that, Jeff.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair to the staff, did the city agree to any price with Enbridge? Price of the land?
Through Mr. Chair, I don't have all the specifics of the agreement of purchase and sale. So any of the specifics regarding prices or costs or specifics regarding that agreement would be captured in that particular agreement. So I would say it's safe to say there would be some sort of monetary value associated with the lands. I just don't have that number in front of me right now.
Any other questions? I have a couple. In particular, it appears that currently on the lands that are subject to easement, that is the access point to the the Enbridge gas building. Is Enbridge planning something different for their access? Are they going to gain access from Carter Street?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So there is some history here in terms of the access to Enbridge and just Enbridge's property in general. So through the agreement of purchase and sale, it was negotiated regarding that particular access and the need for an easement as a result of some underground infrastructure. In addition to that, Enbridge has already applied and sought approval for a site plan amendment to facilitate a new access to Carter Street. So the Enbridge property formerly was 348 Elgin. It is now 101 Carter Street. So that's already been in the works.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Are there any other questions for staff on this report? Seeing none, then I would like to call a question for all those who are in favor. Please show your hands.
Actually, I have one
Oh,
question.
got an extra question? Please go ahead.
Through the chair to the staff, is the land been checked if it's not a wetland or anything like that? Because it's all bush in there. Just before the city gets involved, did they make sure that the land is usable?
Through you, Mr. Chair, looks like Gary Peaver, maybe from Development Engineering, wants to speak to that more specifically.
Yeah, through the chair to the committee member, they have reviewed that land in question in front of the Enbridge site. It was actually designed as a stormwater management kind of facility many years ago. And they're looking to maintain parts of that, but that is part of the process. They're looking at whether they can maintain some of it or whether or not they can rearrange that stormwater management facility. That was not a natural occurring wetland in front of the Enbridge site.
Thank you. I have a kind of a follow-up question to that. If the lands are transferred through the acquiring of the land at 101 Carter Street by the city for the police services building, are there any concerns or issues with the existing development at 101 Carter Street relative to property lines? Are proper setbacks maintained, or will that be something that needs to be dealt with at a different committee at a different time?
Jeff, did you want to handle that one, or do you want me to get it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I understand that question correctly, so items regarding setbacks, that is some of the commentary that staff have provided to ensure that if there's any setbacks that need to be recognized from the new property lines, that they are part and parcel of the zoning application. Similar to what Gary Peaver had indicated regarding the engineering design, there is another process that would be required to facilitate the police station. That's called site plan control, and that's noted in the staff report. That is very much where we get into the the detailed design of the site in terms of how it's going to be engineered, your fire access route, the architectural layout, the landscaping, all that kind of good stuff. So there is another process outside the zoning application that would deal with some of the more maybe specifics regarding the detailed design of the new build.
Thank you. And so
So if I
That
could
will
just
be-
add to that, Mr. Chairman, is you're absolutely correct. I think I know where you're going with this question or line of questioning, is that the current Enbridge site, once the lot is created, will have potential deficiencies, and that hasn't been evaluated yet because the approval of the site plan for the Enbridge site dealt with the entirety of the lands. So if there is the need for a minor variance application to assess the side yard or rear yard standards, then that will be looked at, and it's probably made its way. And I'm not privy to the details of the APS either, right? And I don't think we can disclose what the city buys lands for either, to answer Member Penang's question. But I do think there's probably some clause in that agreement that would say that if they needed to do that, that they would have to apply for it now. And I don't know if they would say, no application fee or something on those lines. I don't want to second guess that, but those are some items that would likely come through those types of agreements or clauses in those agreements.
thank you. Thanks for the clarification. Any other further questions before I go back to the vote? Okay,
All those in favor? Those opposed, if any, motion is carried unanimously.
thank you very much. Consent items. So moving on to consent items, we have one item. It's the minutes of the Planning Advisory Committee meeting from February 27th, 2023. Can I get a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes of that meeting, please? Mover, seconder, and I have the seconder. Are there any errors or omissions? Okay, seeing none, call the question then, please.
All those in favor? Those opposed, if any? Oh, Councillor Hunt, did you have your?
I'm going to abstain. I wasn't at the meeting.
So just for point of clarification, minutes belong to the body itself, not the members that are in attendance. So even if you're not at the meeting, you're not precluded from voting. If you abstain, you will be considered to have been voting in the negative, just so you are aware, according to our procedure bylaw.
Right, then I'll approve them.
Okay, and Mr. Khan, can I get your vote, please? In favor? In favor? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. There are no resolutions. We have no notice of motion. And so the meeting is formally adjourned. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to those who attended virtually.